Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, J.D. Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join J.D. now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Welcome to another episode of the Leading Conversations podcast with Excel Leadership Network. And today we are ecstatic to have the marvelous Max Critchfield with us on the podcast. Max, thanks for being here.
I am happy to be here, and I'm pleased by that alliteration. I thought that was very nice.
Now, you are in Union City. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I live on the border of Union City. I live in Fremont, kind of a district that's right next to it, but I'm just a stone's throw away. Yes.
Are you planting in Union City?
That's correct.
What's the Union? What's that all about? Where did that name come from?
Yeah, that's an interesting lore, I guess. This is what they call kind of the Tri-Cities. I was learning this actually from another pastor friend here in town, but where I live, Fremont, Newark, Union City. I think what I understand was that they were voting for like all of these cities to become a part of Fremont. And then maybe it was both Newark and Union City, just Union City. They backed out at the last minute and decided to stay separate and not become a part of Fremont. So Union City, I think, is a composition of several kind of small towns that formed a union and kind of came together to be one city, but there's kind of several distinct neighborhoods, like historic areas that once had distinct towns, but then joined together to become one.
Wow, okay. And what's the best thing about the Tri-City area?
Yeah, Tri-Cities. Well, I mean, honestly, my first thought was the food. It's a very diverse area with like a lot of different culture. I don't know what their metrics are, but I've seen these articles several times that have named Fremont the happiest city in America. So I'm not exactly sure what their dashboard is, but Fremont is one of the three cities of the Tri-Cities: Fremont, Newark, Union City, and so it's a nice place to live. It is very diverse, and that's reflected in culture. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, in food. So basically, any kind of food from any kind of culture, you could find it probably within 15 or 20 minutes, and it's going to be delicious. So that's something I enjoy about it.
And for those who aren't from California, you're what would you say, 15 miles from Oakland?
Yeah, it is. It's about 30 minutes south of Oakland. Yeah.
And how far to San Francisco, the city?
Yeah, from where I live, it's about 45. So yeah, once you're in Oakland, it's just kind of a hop over the bridge and you're there.
Okay, good. Well, hey, tell us a story. Tell us how you came to Jesus, how you got connected.
Yeah, so I grew up in my mother was kind of culturally Catholic. So my dad, white, and my mom is a mixture of Mexican and Filipino and some Hawaiian. So Mexican and Filipino, especially, those are both really kind of Catholic culture is a big part of that cultural identity. And so I grew up kind of attending mass every Sunday. My mom, we didn't grow up talking much about faith in our home. My dad was just kind of not non-religious. And so, but he was fine with me going to mass with my mom. So I did that throughout my whole childhood. And I kind of joke that I had a constant crink in my neck because at the back of the kind of the sanctuary of the Catholic Church where I grew up, there was a big clock on the back wall. And so probably 20 times per hour service, I was looking back to see how much time was left in the service before I could go home. And that was just me as a child. I wasn't really particularly interested in the things of God. I was listening to it regularly, but I was really self-interested, what I wanted to do, what felt good for me. And so that was like my childhood, middle school years. I got started playing the saxophone at a young age, and I got into a garage band when I was in middle school. And all the guys were older and they were into kind of partying, drinking, and things like that. And so that was sort of my my vision for the good life, was a life of pleasure, And when I was a freshman in high school, a friend of mine invited me to a youth group, and I didn't really have that at my Catholic church. And she was like, "Oh yeah, come to this thing." It was a girl I was dating at the time. It's on Wednesday nights. It's fun. You should try. So my parents were like, I guess. So they took me there, and it was this giant room. It was probably 200 high schoolers in this room, and it was filled with couches. There were no even walkways between the couches. Like they later had to remove them all because the fire marshal deemed it unsafe. But kind of in early 2000s youth group fashion, it was just like 50 couches, and you had to crawl over them to sit down. And yeah, it was fun. The music, the youth pastor got up there, gave a little talk, and there were a lot of people there, and it was a good time. So I was like, I'm going to keep coming to this. And so that girl, we broke up a few months later, but I kept going. And that summer, they had a summer camp, and so I went to this camp. And during that camp, they had an altar call. I'd just been talking about Jesus in a way really I had never thought about him before. And they said, "Hey, if you want to put your trust in Jesus, would you stand up?" And so I did. And I remember just thinking that week that there's something missing. I see the joy and like freedom and peace that these people have that I feel like I don't have in my life. And so I stood up to say yes to Jesus. But the problem was that I didn't want to say no to anything either. Like I wanted Jesus. So I wanted to keep doing the stuff that I
Yeah.
was doing. And so I tell people that kind of led to the most miserable time of my life, because I kind of think of it as like bifurcating, kind of split in half, where it was just kind of, I wanted Jesus, but I wanted to hang on to my old life too. And so I got more and more miserable, kind of keeping up, trying to keep those things together. And then I was a junior in high school, and I was really just feeling low. Like, I know this sounds dramatic, but as a 16-year-old, just thinking like I blew it, like I've really lied to God. I've been living this double life. And um, at that point, a friend invited me on another retreat. At this point, I was going to everything. I was like the youth group kid, and so I was like, "Well, I'm gonna go to this one, I guess." And I went there just very low, just despondent in my heart. And there was no band, there was no speaker. There wasn't really a particularly emotional experience from the program of the weekend. We are actually just reading a book and talking about it in small groups. But what kind of came over me was a sense of God saying to me, "Max, nothing's hidden from me. I've seen your hypocrisy. I've seen, your double-mindedness, but I have never stopped loving and pursuing you. In fact, I'm crazy about you. And that's why I died. I came for you." And I felt in that moment the love of God, um, in a way I never had before, and in a way that transformed me completely. And so I remember that Sunday, maybe it was a holiday weekend, so maybe it was a Monday, waking up to pack up and go home. And I remember sitting on the side of my bed and just thinking, something's different about me. Like I've basically raised my hand to accept Christ at every camp, like rededicate my life. It's going to stick this time. But I remember just being kind of surprised as I sat there, because I felt something different in me. And I would say, maybe biblically, we would say that I was born again. And I haven't been the same since. That was almost 25 years ago. And that was the start of it all.
Wow, that's amazing. Was there a call to ministry that happened?
Yeah, so that was that weekend. That was like maybe in February of my junior year of high school. So a year later, they did that retreat again. And by this time, like some of my youth leaders, my youth pastor could see like something was different about me, like there had been a change. And so
Right.
I think my youth pastor kind of noticing that was like, hey, do you want to like, share your testimony, like talk at this retreat this next year? Like it was coming up. And I was like, sure. Um, I had never done anything like that before. I'd been in a small group and stuff. And so I started to prepare my testimony. And maybe my youth pastor, he should have probably read it before I said it. He didn't screen it. It wasn't bad, but it was very honest. And so kind of on one of the nights of this retreat, I got up and we had, a big bonfire and we were kind of singing around this fire. And then he asked me to share my story. And I did. And it was a powerful moment for the people listening, I suppose, but even more so for me. And I remember kind of standing aside, and it was a very emotional experience. And a youth leader, a friend or two, kind of came and put their arm around me and encouraged me. And this was up at Lake Shasta, where this retreat was. And I remember it was just a very clear night, and I could see the moon. Um, it was full. It just seemed so big, like a super moon. And I remember just looking up at it, and I felt that just a sense from the Lord that this is what I want you to do. I want you to minister. And I think I was 17 at that time. And that was the start of it. So I went off to college. I went to UC Davis. And kind of as I continued to grow and as I had more of a sense of my gifting and seeing that affirmed by more people, that people kind of affirmed that call to ministry. And that's what I pursued in college and beyond. But it started kind of on the shores of Lake Shasta, just kind of looking up at the moon. And I felt the Lord place that upon me, that this is what I want you to be doing.
Cool. That's an amazing story. So you go to UC Davis. I'm not aware that it's a Bible college. So what did you take there? Youth
Yeah.
ministry?
Yeah, that's funny. I at that point I was not thinking, Christian school or anything like that. Honestly, UC Davis was the best school that I got into. I was not a particularly inspiring student. I think I had a 3.4 GPA, which I'm quite confident would not get you into UC Davis today. And my dad, he had gone to Berkeley. He'd gotten his undergrad and grad degrees at Berkeley. And so I had applied, I even gotten a special letter of recommendation from the marching band director at Berkeley, and that even was not enough to save my academic prospects. So Davis was the best school I got into. But interestingly enough, it was also the school that my youth pastor had gone to. And so he said, hey, there's a great college ministry that you can be a part of. And so I went off to Davis, and I mean those were the most significant formative spiritual years of my life were there. And in fact, my college Christian fellowship was called College Life, and it was it was the ministry of a local church there in Davis. And so I just got connected in community. Like you said, it's not a Bible college, but I was just so young and new in faith. I was like, well, what do I went undecided. I didn't have a major. And then after my second year, it was like, well, I really like music and I'm really into Jesus. So I'm going to just major in music and religious studies. And so that's what I did. And actually, my professor, the person who taught the majority of kind of the Christian courses in the religious studies um, department, was also like an adjunct professor at a local seminary. And he was a very eclectic kind of person, but incredible knowledge. And so he taught classes on like the letters of John and Pauline theology and the Gospels and just all sorts of things. So I sort of got a seminary education at
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 UC
UC
Davis.
Davis. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's cool. What happened after that?
Yeah, so I started dating a gal. We both got saved in the same ministry as high schoolers back in Fremont, and we started dating in my sophomore year of college. So we dated long distance. She went to Cal State Hayward. They've since renamed it Cal State East Bay because they were ashamed of Hayward. But
I'd
they
never heard that.
she went to it. She went to Cal State Hayward, and I went to
I love the
Davis.
way you
So
say that. The way you say
yeah,
that.
yeah. I they're about an hour apart, so we dated long distance. So I proposed to her in the winter of 2007, and then I think I woke up the next day and I was like, "Well, if we're gonna get married, I need like a job." So I at that point there was like the youth specialties job board was sort of the hot spot for finding a job, and so I posted my resume there, and I think the next day I got a call from a church that was desperate for another youth pastor. They'd been out without one for, I think, 9 months, maybe at that point. And it was in Benicia, which is about halfway between Fremont and Davis in the North Bay area, North San Francisco Bay Area. And so, yeah, had a few conversations with them, and I ended up going there, and I was the youth pastor there for almost 9 years. In fact, there's a funny connection we've already talked about. That was New Harbor Community Church, and I think that was a church you helped to start. So,
Yes, Lori and I came from Colorado. We parachuted into Benicia and started a church from complete scratch there. Didn't know a soul. It was like a crazy. It was a crazy place to go. Except at the time, Benicia was like the best place in the Bay Area to live, and
mm,
it was a great place to raise small kids. We loved
yeah.
it. So yeah, we started that church. You had to hear that you were the youth pastor there later. That's really cool.
Yeah, Benicia is beautiful. Those were formative years for life and ministry. First years of marriage, first time in a full time ministry role. And yeah, the person who succeeded you, Kelly Patchen, he was my pastor. He's still the pastor there. He's been there for almost 25
A
years, maybe.
million years, yeah. He's
Yeah,
been a
yeah.
million years.
He's been there a really long time and still serving faithfully. So he was my first kind of mentor in full time ministry, and I'm just grateful for that experience. So,
Wow. So you're in Benicia, then what happened after that?
yeah, I had the chance to come back to Fremont, and so at that point we had our first child. We were pregnant with our second, and yeah, I and this is part of a theme that's emerged of my story, especially in the last, well, my whole life, I guess, but it come into sharper focus in the last 10 years was like a growing passion and care for this particular region, for the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And so obviously when you start to have kids, having family nearby makes a big difference. And I think at this time, my wife's dad had passed away. He had died unexpectedly in 2011, and had been married just for 4 years, I think, at that point. And so family had come in even sharper focus as something that was really important. Um, and so I actually had the opportunity to come back to be the high school pastor of the group where I had become a Christian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that place that my girlfriend had invited me to when I was 14 years old, they were in a time of transition. I still had a lot of friends, people I knew that went there, worked there. And so they said, "Hey, would you be interested in making this move?" And so yeah, just with our second child on the way, and having in-laws, grandparents close by is such a blessing and gift when you're having children. And so it checked a lot of boxes for us, and it brought us closer to family and also to a region that God has given us a heart for. So that's where we went next, moved back to Fremont in 2016, 10 years ago now. And I was the high school pastor there for, I think, just over 3 years. Yeah.
Wow. When did the church planting bug bite you?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I was there at Bridges, and then I went on to be the college pastor at a church called Three Crosses. It's in Castro Valley,
Yeah.
which is really kind of central East Bay. Castro Valley is kind of it's interesting because it's the largest unincorporated community in the Bay Area. I think it's the largest city that's not a city. So I
Okay.
think 65,000 people live in Castro Valley, but it's not actually a town. It's they never incorporated to be a formal city, so it's just like kind of overseen by the county. So it's kind of a quirky, and it's also really at like the heart of the East Bay. And the East Bay, yeah, for people who might be unfamiliar, like yeah, San Francisco's on the peninsula. It's like we don't call it the West Bay, but that's what it is. It's like the western side of the San Francisco Bay Area, and then Castro Valley. It can be a bit kind of gritty. You know, you have some like more urban type areas interfacing with more suburban type spots, but they're all really close together. And Castro Valley is kind of a mashup of all of that. And so in going there, it felt kind of like I was getting closer to the heart of the bay. And as I was working there, they invited me into an ordination process, and I was ordained there, I think in 2022. And I think what dawned on me in working there and going through ordination was that God had really given me a heart for this region, for the East Bay area. And my great grandparents actually moved up here from Southern California in 1929, I think,
Wow.
to grow strawberries. So as of this taping, you know, my family came here almost 100 years ago to the East Bay.
Wow.
And so I think I'm a fifth generation resident of this place. And as I look around, you asked me what I like about it. I think a theology of place is really important to me, and that like this is it's a unique calling from God to this region that's very significant and is a significant part of my life. So yeah, and working at that church, just a call to the region kind of came into focus a bit more, that just a sense from God, like I want you to be a shepherd and to advance my kingdom here in the East Bay. And so maybe 2 years ago, had a job change, and at that point was just kind of thinking, okay, I have this heart for this area, for this region, and a growing sense of like just my ministry calling. um, so maybe church planning is kind of the next step for me. Like it had sort of been on the back burner. The church had hosted that exponential conference maybe the
Yes.
year before my job change, and so I never really grew up in churches or worked at churches that talked or thought much about church planning, and so it was not much on my radar. But I remember going to that conference and getting ordained at this church, and like, wow, a heart for kingdom advance, particularly in this area. Now I'm hearing about church planning. I'm meeting more church planters. In fact, the missions arm of that church is about resourcing church planners around the world. They have this global ministry where they support like hundreds or thousands of church planners in all these different countries. And so all these different kind of little streams were coming together, and then that's when we jumped into it.
How is it going?
How's it going? Yeah, it's exciting. It's I think somebody said that to me yesterday. They're like, "Oh, yeah, it's exciting." And my wife, she tells me sometimes, "You have a really interesting definition of exciting." So as we're talking, it's been about a year. We started every week worship services in September of 2025. And we had a series of preview services starting June, July, August of 2025. So it's been about a year since we started meeting regularly. And it's really incredible to look around and see just what God has done and is doing in the lives of people, the ways He's drawing people to Himself. I have just the benefit of, you know, personally great support, guidance, mentorship. people who are really cheering. There's just like a growing, I guess you could call unity movement in the Bay Area, particularly where like an ecosystem of kingdom-minded churches and organizations and networks are all really coming together to pool resources to plant churches and see kingdom advancement in a way that I've never seen in the time that I've been here. So it's really exciting, and I feel just super honored to be a part of that story.
Well, it's amazing, and it's just uh, honorable that somebody from the Bay Area would want to plant in the Bay Area. When we were there, we'd have people come from the Midwest. They'd come out. They'd go to Pier 39, have some
Clam chowder.
clam chowder in a bowl, drive down Lombard Street, go to a Giants game, and say, "Hey, I think I'm going to plant in the Bay Area."
Yes.
And it was like, oh, this is a different place than any other place. It's just so different.
Yeah.
There's you know, I wasn't a big believer in territorial spirits till we moved back there to plant. And it's just it's great that you're there. I'm so happy that you're planting, and we're trying to help anybody that goes to the Bay Area. Man, you've got my vote, you got my respect. So keep it up.
Thank
Hey,
you so
talk about.
much.
I know you're is it a dahlia guy? What's the deal with
Yeah,
it?
sure. Flower
got it.
farmer. Yes.
You're a flower farmer.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'm like co or bivocational, that's like my other job, but it's a significant a passion project, an outsized passion project. How about we call it that? But maybe 12 years ago, I was at a family dinner for Easter, actually. And an uncle of mine, he brought these bulbs, basically. They call them tubers, kind of like a potato is a tuber, to our dinner. And he said, "Hey, I grow these flowers called dahlias." And he was living, I don't think he wasn't married at the time. I think he was living with a roommate in San Francisco. And the flower of San Francisco is the dahlia. And so his roommate was a member of this Dahlia Society where they gather monthly, they talk about growing these particular flowers.
Of course they do.
There's a section, there's an affinity group for everything, right? So
they were the original flower child.
Yeah. Yeah. So he had these tubers in a bucket, and I was like, well, I guess I'll take them home. I was living in Benicia at that time, and I didn't have a yard. I didn't have basically any dirt. I just got a few pots. I put them on my patio, and I planted these flowers. And like I said, my great grandparents came here to farm, so I grew up kind of around agriculture. I mean, obviously, so much of the Bay land that used to be fields and orchards is now homes and
Right.
shopping malls and all that thing like that. But so I've grown up, gardening and that kind of stuff. My parents are into it, my grandparent, all that stuff. And so I planted them and I watered them and they came up and I was just kind of enthralled by them. I thought they were beautiful and amazing. So I just started learning more about them, and I've grown more basically every year. So that first year I grew 2, then it was like 15. I asked a congregant in the church if I could use an unused part of their yard to grow some of the flowers. So I grew like 15 at their house, and then I grew 30, and then we moved to Fremont. I grew 50 in my backyard. Then I asked my neighbor who had a part of his yard he wasn't using if I could grow 300 dahlias in his yard, and he said yes. So, and now we have a family farm property down in Watsonville, which is by Santa Cruz, and I grow about 2,000 of these dahlia plants. Um, and we open seasonally for U-Picks. I've sold them at farmers markets, direct to florists. I've hybridized my own varieties. It's not something that we depend on for like a source of income year to year, but it is a significant way that we kind of share beauty with people. And it has been interesting to see the intersection of the flower farming and the church planting coming together in ways that I didn't expect. Because when it came to like, okay, planting, it's like, well, I actually know a lot about planting, you know? And when we think about the teaching of Jesus, and the teaching of the scriptures, a lot of times the illustrations from which, the scriptures draw upon to describe the dynamics of the kingdom and the spiritual life are agricultural. So stay tuned for the book that was pending. No, I just so I being kind of in the soil and watching things grow and all of that stuff. And I mean, that's why I'm a church planner. I have a bajillion ideas, and a book called Wisdom from the Field is one of my ideas that may never come to fruition. But if
No,
if
you
it
got to
would,
you got to do it. You got to do it. I'm going to keep asking you about it.
okay.
And will dahlias grow? If they grow in Benicia, will they grow here in Elk Grove and Sacramento area?
You know what? They don't like oppressive heat. So if it's over 90 degrees consistently, they don't grow, they just survive. So
Okay.
generally you need to have them. So if Elk Grove is a little cooler, I know Sacramento in the summer gets, I think, pretty regularly above 90, so they wouldn't be super happy there. But they grow great here in the East Bay. In fact, there's a city called San Leandro, which is on the other side of the peninsula from San Francisco, and the dahlia is actually the official flower of that city as well. So yeah, there's a lot of places they grow well, but they can't be too hot.
Well, yeah, maybe we can, do some things to put them in the shade and stuff or what. I want to get
Yeah.
I want to get a few bulbs from you and give it a shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would be happy to share them with you.
And I'm actually looking up here the dahlia. Some of these pretty cool looking. So
What's
uh,
interesting is that, I mean, dahlia, it's a gigantic umbrella that covers literally tens of thousands of different types of flowers. So they come in all sorts of colors, shapes. They could be the size of a quarter. They could be 14 inches across. They come in basically every color except brown and blue, um, and black, although you can get pretty close with a really, really dark purple. So yeah, I've spent almost 14 years now, learning about them, growing them, and it has been fun to just. And I think that, like, when I go to the church planter assessment center and they ask like, "Oh, are you entrepreneurial? Like, have you grown something?" And it's like, well, yeah, I guess I kind of have. So
all right. Hey, you've been doing this for a while. Let's
yeah,
end with give us a leadership tip.
yeah, yeah. I think, man. Well, I think what's top of mind for me, we're going through a series on prayer in our church, and I've just been reflecting on my own journey of church planting. And I would say that this has been the most faith building time of my life, in part because it's been the most desperate time of my life in
Sure.
terms of the most meaningful things. And I was just saying this last Sunday to the church, like, the most meaningful things that we would hope to happen here at our church, only God can do. And so I think I've just come up against that again and again in my life. And church planning has particularly kind of brought that to the forefront, that maybe I could, tweak some things and push buttons to get a gathering of people. But for God to build his church, that's supernatural. And that if I only succeeded in creating a gathering, but the church was not built and advanced, which can happen, that it would not be successful in a kingdom perspective. And so all of that to say that the importance of prayer and praying like I've never prayed before in my life has really come to the forefront. And I've appreciated along the church planning journey, like, some of the first advice I ever got was gather a group of people to start praying for you and start praying with you for the work that God wants to do through you. And that's only deepened as I've gone through this journey. And so I think I've been guilty of seeing prayer as just kind of like the stuff I sprinkle on top of my
Yeah.
plans, and I don't think that historically, throughout my Christian life, I think Vance Pittman says prayer isn't what we do before the work, prayer is the work. And that's only grown for me as I've gone along this process. And there's a lot of work to do, leadership development, finance, vision, preaching, leadership development, all of those things are important. But I think so often I would just focus on those things and just pray and ask Jesus to kind of bless my plans. And this journey has really turned that on its head, that I've just seen more and more all of that flows from a life of prayer and just a heart that God has given me to pray. And so, as far as a leadership tip of like, okay, what can I, do to see this move forward in a meaningful way? I've just been asking God, would you cultivate a heart for desperate kingdom prayer? And would you do that in some other people? Like found a couple on our church plant team that really has a passion for prayer. I was just praying with them one day, and I just felt like a power in our collective prayer. And so when we finished, I said, "Hey, would you guys be open to meeting with me more regularly to just pray?" And I mean, their eyes lit up. It was like they won the lottery. They were so excited. And so weekly for the last couple months, we've been having I guess it's been 2 months now, maybe, a weekly prayer meeting at their house. And it's been so enriching, and seeing answers to prayer and just coming back to that truth that, like, most of the meaningful things that we will hope to see in Living Hope Church or in any place is only the work of God. And if that's true, then we have to pray. So,
Great, great. That's a really good reminder. Hey, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for all the planting that you're doing, and
yes.
for being willing to be, one of the pillars in the Bay Area. So really appreciate your story. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It's just super fun.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.